All right, so all primary school kids should have to learn an Asian language. So first of all, we're going to look at it from the affirmative side. We need to talk about an issue for the topic. We need to talk about stakeholders. We need to build a model around this. All this stuff that we spoke about last week, because it's a should topic, we need to do it again. I'm just going to do that, so maybe we can see it a bit better. All right, so first of all, what do you remember what we talked about in terms of issue? What is an issue, and why do we use it within debating? Who remembers? Yep, go.
Is it like why are we talking about this?
Yeah, why do we need to talk about this topic at this time? So what is an issue for this? Now I feel like I'm standing in the dark. What is an issue for this topic? Why do we want to talk about this topic? Yep, Adam?
It comes up quite often and is taken up by quite people on each side.
Okay, yes. Now that might be a reason why we're trying to deconstruct it in a debate, but why today in Australia do we want to talk about that primary school kids need to learn a second language? So not why should we deconstruct this as a debate, but why should this happen? So thinking it from the affirmative team, why should this happen? Yeah.
Because like these days there are more Asian people coming into Australia, and it would be easier to like know. And also Chinese people are often coming in and like doing things like and making businesses.
Exactly. Okay, so it's the huge Asian influence around Australia. Looking at the multiculturalism of Australia, but particularly looking upon the impact of our Asian neighbours. And yes, we're right about the influx of Asian immigrants, visitors, people coming into Australia anyway. We're a multicultural country, and we need to look at who are our neighbours, who do we trade with, who do we see and deal with, and who's visiting, and things like that. So it's all important. Now that's going to be really important later on, both to the negative team and to the affirmative team. Okay, so why could we say, or what could we say as an issue then? So primary school kids need to learn an Asian language, and they need to start it from next year or halfway through next year. Why? Like, why should we start it straight away? Pretty much, yeah, go on.
Because it's a skill for the future, because second languages are dominating our world.
Yep, that's right. Because a second language, almost regardless of what that language is actually a fantastic skill to have. So it's about, upskilling our kids. It's about improving education. All right, we can think of some other things later. Stakeholders. When I talked about that, what do stakeholders mean in a debate? What are they? Yeah, back.
The people who the issue matters to, or who would it affect if we change?
Okay, yes. I was asking the guy next to you, but good idea. Okay. So who benefits or who impacts these changes? So if we do this, if we introduce this, who's going to be benefited by it? Who's going to be impacted by it, about it, no matter whether it's negative or positive? Who's going to be impacted? Yeah.
Students, teachers, people.
Yep, exactly. Students, teachers, community, anyone that has contact with schools, but mainly the students, isn't it? Because it's about the students learning something else. Okay, good. All right, let me see what I've put on here. First thing that you want to ask, and maybe a negative team, this sounds like a negative point, and it kind of is, but even as an affirmative team, you want to start thinking about, at some point during your prep, what are the negative team going to hit us with? If we're on the negative side, what would we ask? And that's a good thing to be able to, it's kind of like a preemptive strike. If I can address some of these things, maybe, or I can at least have an answer to it if they hit us with it, then that might be a good thing, rather than be surprised about it. So you might either want to have this up your sleeve as a rebuttal. What about kids who just don't want to learn it, or they can't, or they're finding it difficult to learn a language? What do we do with them? You might want to put that into your first affirmative speech or your second affirmative speech. Okay, for kids who can't or don't want to learn, this is our answer. Or wait for it as a rebuttal. Because the negative team might go, but not all kids can do this, or find it difficult, or don't want to. How are we going to answer that? Yeah.
Also, it's a negative thing.
Let's talk about negative later. But if we're going to use this maybe as a point to attack or rebut, what can we say? What can we say? Yep.
We could say that kids could get extra help outside of school.
That could be a possibility, although that brings its own sort of problems. Think about something else, yeah.
With the children who don't want to do it,
Yep.
well, that's just like, well, they should, it's for their own benefit, so they should only try. And for the people who can't do it, like, no one can't do something. They just don't have, they don't put enough effort into it. So if they put a bit more effort into it, then
Maybe they just can't do it yet. You know what? And this stuff, this topic could be different. It could be that all primary school kids should have to learn a musical instrument. All primary school kids, should have to do compulsory sport for however many hours a week. Like, that's how that topic can be different. So you might not see it like this, Asian language, but it'll tack something else on it. Music, sport, drama. Like, they can often change the topic like that, and it's working out the benefits and detriments of whatever they're saying. Now, what I encourage affirmative teams to say, if they get hit with this, what about students who don't want to learn it? Tough. Like, honestly, you stand up and you go, that's bad luck. Because you know what? There's plenty of kids in classes that don't like to read, and they don't like to do maths, and they don't like to play music, and you know what? They just do it. Why? Because it's part of the curriculum. We're going to make this part of the curriculum, and therefore it's going to be compulsory to learn it. You don't get to always choose what you want to do at school, right? So that's the other thing that you bring home. If this is introduced into the curriculum, it's part of the curriculum. And we're going to support the kids that struggle with it. We're going to support the kids that don't like it. And you know what? It's not going to be a whole lot of, a teacher standing out the front, and we'll get to them in a moment because that's going to be an important factor. Say this word, say, this sentence, this is that. We're going to introduce games, we're going to introduce apps, we're going to introduce, a whole lot of stuff that's going to make learning a language so much fun and a whole lot easier that the kids are not even going to know they're learning. It's going to be almost like playtime. Conversations, the games, you know what? We're going to make this so much fun, you're going to want to come to school and do it. And that for a negative team is like, oh my goodness, what kid after they're done is not going to want to be involved in this? This is going to be brilliant. And that's how you got to sell it. Because you get to make it whatever you want. You don't have to make it a boring lesson. We're going to plan a whole thing. So let's say you're doing Japanese. We're going to have Japanese days. And we're going to, have people from the Japanese culture in, and they're going to show ancient weapons and give language talks, and then we're going to dialogue, and you know what? And then maybe we're going to have a Year 6 excursion to Japan. Why not? Because you get to make stuff like that up. Now that'd be unusual because there's not many primary sort of excursions overseas, but that's okay. That's okay. Let the negative team stand up and go, there are no primary school excursions overseas, and you get to come back with, yet, because after we're done with this, you're going to want to go. So it's how you're gonna sell it as a whole package is really important, and a really big point for an affirmative team. So look at that. Now, you're going to have to build a really good model around this. Remember, should topic, should have a model. That's how you remember that. Remember that link we spoke about yesterday? Last week, seems like yesterday. Should topic, should have a model. All right? So, who's going to do this? We're kind of handcuffed, for want of a better word. Who's going to do it? Yeah. You can't change that. You know what you can change though? And I've hidden it somewhere in here. If it's going to come up, but it's not going to come up. No, that was the fact that I wanted you to have a look at. There we go. Let's talk about that in a moment. It's somewhere here. When it says primary school kids, you get to actually choose, but you kind of don't. So primary school kids are what? K to 6. No one's going to argue that point, are they? They're not going to say this includes year 7, year 8, middle school. We're not talking about America. Primary school kids, K to 6. Now you get to choose as an affirmative team who does this. Is it going to be K to 2? Is it going to be 3 to 6? Is it going to be K to 6? And you need to be very careful. Because what I'll encourage you to do as a negative team is if an affirmative team goes, we're going to teach this K to 2, you're going to ask them, why not 3 to 6? If they say, we're going to introduce it for 3 to 6, you ask them, why not K to 2? What they don't want to talk about is what you want to talk about. Okay? You need to be concentrating on that and listening for it. Now, I'd suggest you as an affirmative team, you've got to make it K to 6. You have to. And if you cut anything out, it can't be the K. A child, as young as kindergarten and even preschool, will pick up a second language even faster than someone in year 6. Because they're still learning their own language. So they're in that mindset of learning a language. They're the best candidates for this. If you want to do this, kindy has to be the place to start. They'll love it. They'll absolutely love it, and they'll pick it up like that. So, also, you need to ask yourself around that whole, this is something we want to change, what's currently happening? In the majority of primary schools, we might get some languages being taught, but it's not big. It's not a lot of primary schools. There are some selected ones where you can pick some. So, that's where you bring in this change. This is why it has to change. This is why we're going to change it. So, who's it going to be? I'm going to suggest you K to 6. They're going to learn a new language. Where's it going to happen? Limit it to New South Wales. We won't go the whole of Australia. We could potentially, but we're going to trial it within New South Wales. We're going to see, and once we gauge its success, then we're going to open it Australia-wide. Because we can because each of the states and territories are under their own Department of Education, best to start with just one, working it with one. When's it going to happen? Next year. Now, there's a whole lot of logistical stuff that you need to start thinking about that I'm going to get to in the negative team's case, because it's big points for them, but you need to answer them or have an answer for them as an affirmative team. Now, this is what you need to ask yourself as an affirmative, and the negative, hopefully if they're smart, are going to hit you with. What will the kids get from learning a second language that they won't get from another subject or an extension of a subject? So, what do you get from learning a second language that you're not going to get, for example, if we say, you know what, we're going to increase the number of hours of maths to study, that literacy is studied. We're going to increase history, we're going to increase geography, we're going to introduce music. What do you just get from a language or learning a second language? None of those other subjects can't give you. Because as a negative team, this is the question you need to ask. So as an affirmative, this is the one you've got to have an answer to. I suggest you a couple of things from quotes that I found. People necessarily at this stage don't really matter. It's just, I just found these quotes and thought, you know what, it's interesting, you could add them in as points. So, first one. Young people who have the opportunity to learn languages will not only be able to communicate better with people across the world, they have a deeper and intercultural understanding and cultural intelligence. This is how you sell it as an affirmative team. We're not just learning another language. We're going to learn a culture, and we're going to be more intelligent people at the end of it. We're building in school now the whole person. This not only benefits you in being able to speak someone else's language, it benefits you in understanding a whole new culture and a way of life that you haven't experienced yet. So you get other benefits. In our generation, it's important that everyone speaks at least one or two other languages because Australia is now such a multicultural country. We'll talk about that in a moment. Last one. Young people's brains are absolutely wired for language learning, and it's a real advantage and an optimum time to start children learning a second language as young as preschool age. In our generation, we are, look up here, this is an Australian statistic, less than 13% of students exiting year 12 have studied a second language. Less than 13%, that's a fact that you want to drop into this as your backup to why. Less than 13% of our year 12s are coming out knowing a second language. We are second to last in the world. How do you sell this? We're behind. It's not that it's not important or, not important. It's the fact that the rest of the world is doing it. Other countries are learning 2 and 3 languages before they leave year 12, or their equivalent of year 12. We are not. How do we, as the affirmative team, you say, how do we not do this? When we're playing on a global scale now, we're behind. We're behind. This is catching up. That's really tough for a negative team to argue against. This brings us up to speed with what the majority of the world is doing. We're falling behind here. All right, so seems like as an affirmative team, and there's a bunch of other stuff we could talk about, but I want to get to the negative side before we finish today. You can present a really good case with things like this. Let's have a look at the negative side. What do we got here? All right. So, I'll get to the big red ball thing in a moment. Negative. First question you ask the affirmative team, why is this the answer? Why a second language? Now that's all based on the fact that maybe they haven't come up with those statistics of we're behind a lot of other countries in the world and it'll benefit the whole person and things. You've got to think, if I'm a negative team and the affirmative haven't set it up that much, what am I going to say back to them? One of the first things you say is, what makes this the answer? Like, and then, you know, should we go with a counter model here? Now by that would be, okay, as a negative team, what we want to do is we want to say, no, kids shouldn't learn an Asian language, we should learn a musical instrument. So we've presented a whole case on why learning a musical instrument is a whole lot better than learning a second language. That's your counter model. So basically you want to debate with them that we're going to get more out of learning music than we will out of learning a second language. Now that's tough because you also have to argue the status quo as well as argue your own case for music. So I'd suggest not to do it. As a negative team, you've got enough with arguing why things should remain the same and picking away at their model as well. So, based on the status quo, learning a language seems to be compulsory for a lot of year 7 and 8 people. Not necessarily an Asian one, but a language, French, German. Asian languages are also in there as well, Italian, things like that. So you can talk about how languages are already started and working on in high school, and you have the option to continue them on. And that model seems to be working. And people like that. People have an interest in the language, continue studying it. There's that sort of thing. If the affirmative team do this, what happens to those languages that are being taught, like French, German, and Italian? Do they suddenly not get taught anymore? Are they still going to be included? Other things you want to talk about is where do these teachers come from? Okay, let's say every single primary school in New South Wales is going to start learning an Asian language. How? Where are the teachers? Who does it? Teachers like me? Do I go and get retrained in an Asian language? I know a bit of Japanese, but that's not probably enough to, you know, teach a really good class on it. Where do these teachers come from? Where do we find them? This also, don't get into a debate on this about money. Never. We might address that at a different point, but this is not the debate to bring up the it's too expensive to get all these teachers. Look at the actual thing. Think about it from a negative point of view. If we were going to do this, if they were going to do this, how would they set it up? Where would they get the people from? Where do you find all these Asian language teachers? You know, particularly if they say it's going to start next year. Can we get that many Asian language teachers by then? I'd probably suggest no. If it's going to happen a couple of years' time, and then we need to actually approach a whole lot of people to train as Asian language teachers to teach in the schools, it's going to at least need to be 1 or 2 per school. Think about that. How many teachers is that? Okay, you could be really smart and as an affirmative team go, no, it's not 2 per school. It's going to be 2 per 4 schools, and we're going to rotate them around. So you might teach somewhere in the morning, then move to a middle session of that school. You might almost get away with that. That's busy. That's a lot. Might work. At least it's an answer. Okay, so think about it. Where do the teachers come from? That's what I was talking about before. So, you know, why is the answer not more sport since, you know, Australia is the second obese nation on the planet? Why not make them do more sports so they're fitter? What about looking at our literacy and maths rates and our science rates? Why isn't more science the answer? Things like that. And then that's the question you ask them. After you've gone, why don't we do more sport or things like, why are you telling us the affirmative team are locked into this? They've got to say this is the answer. You get to pick anything. Why isn't this the answer? Tell me that students are going to be more benefited by doing this than this. By doing this than this. Pick something. Okay? They need to prove this is going to be the answer. Because you can say, from music, we'll get more of an understanding of maths. You know, from playing sport, we'll get better coordination skills. You know, that could be an answer. All right. Time is a good thing. If they've gone, we're just going to introduce this language, and they haven't talked about, all right, we're going to cut literacy times down, there's going to be less science time, we're going to extend, we're going to put it on an extra hour of the day. You know, when's it going to be studied? Because if they haven't extended the day, either starting it earlier or finishing it later, when does it happen? Because we're already packed in the curriculum. It's already full. There's already enough going on in schools. And now you want to teach language in a primary school. Where's it going to go? What do you take out? What isn't as important? And if they haven't said anything, make up something ridiculous. Go, okay, so now we're going to cut all literacy programs and put in an Asian language program because that's what the affirmative team want. If they haven't said how it works, make up something that would never work. Because I guess since they haven't told us where it's going, let's just take out literacy. No one's going to want to do that. That's ridiculous. But at least the affirmative team will go, wow, we really haven't thought about how this fits in. And that's what you're questioning them on. How does it fit? Where does it go? How much time? If they haven't said, we're going to do half an hour a day, say to them, well, I guess we're doing half a day's worth of Asian language once a week. Is that the time they're talking about or not? Or you get to make that up if they haven't said. Now, most important thing, yep, we talked about that. This. Have a checklist for the model. I'll get to your point in a moment, Amelia. Have a checklist for your model. Honestly, as a negative team, write down who, what, when, where, and you're checking those off. If they haven't told you who's doing it, as in, is it K to 2, K to 6, you want to talk about that. If they haven't told you what is actually happening, like what languages are being taught, if they haven't said what particular, like we're going to do Japanese or Korean or Mandarin, you get to pick something. Like find something really small and obscure to go, okay, we're gonna learn an ancient dialect of the Mongolian people, according to them, because they haven't told us what languages we're doing. They've just told us it's going to be an Asian language. So let's pick one that isn't even spoken anymore, and we'll have that. Whatever they don't talk about, you want to talk about, because that's picking holes in their model. That's your best attack as a negative team. Amelia, what do you want to say?
So if you say like to them, we're gonna do this, like say we're gonna do half a day every day.
Yeah, half an hour every day, yeah.
Yeah. What do you do if they come back and say, actually we're gonna be doing an hour a week?
Okay.
What do you do if they...
Oh, what do you do if they finally come back and fix that up? You come back and go, well, it's great that they just thought of that and now at least we finally know. So all you're doing, and it's kind of a bit of a smart aleck response, but what you're showing an adjudicator is, A, you've heard it, and B, they just made it up. And you really... See, you've pointed these things out because their model isn't complete. If they suddenly come up with an answer, which is supposedly their response, then you get to say they just thought of it. How do you counter that as an affirmative team? Let's say that you've sat there and you've gone, oh, we didn't say how long it was going to be. Okay, you've got a couple of things. You could ignore it and just carry on. Particularly if you have just made it up on the spot, or you could stand up, and what could be a really good tactic is you could thank the negative team. We'd like to thank the negative team for actually highlighting, once again, you haven't said it, but why not? Once again, that it is going to be an hour a week, and we're glad that we've made that clear for them. So pretend you've already said it, and they didn't hear it. A good adjudicator will know you're lying, you'll look more confident, they will suddenly go, did they really say it and we missed it? You want them to start doubting. Never admit that you've made a mistake. Always thank them when they have pointed out something that you've missed, and then add it to, how do you twist something to your advantage? And that's debating. Or otherwise you can just apologize. But don't do that. You want to always try and look strong. Thanks for pointing it out. We did have it in our model. It obviously wasn't as clear to you as what you'd like it, so here it is again. And they'll sit there going, they didn't have it. They didn't have it at all. But they've got to prove that. And you've just said you did. So they say you don't, you said, and then you leave it. If they come back on it, then you can go, oh, they really didn't have it. And, and you get to stand up and go, look, we could say it a third time, but we're just going to leave it. So don't get into the, yes, we did. No, you didn't. Let them play that game. They'll look really silly in doing it. Yep, last couple of things before we finish up.
Last time I saw this debate with this university student, the third speaker said that, so they actually mentioned this point, but in the end he said they never mentioned it. But if
And did they? Have they actually mentioned it or not?
They have mentioned
Okay,
it.
yeah.
They said they didn't. But
Yeah.
would that work? Because they actually did lose.
It depends. It wouldn't have come down to that. An adjudicator keeps really good notes. So he or she's going to know whether, in the end, whether they said it or not. The thing is, so often debates get caught up on really silly things that really shouldn't be talked about, and you need to avoid those things. Sometimes teams will attack the most ridiculous thing which really doesn't need to be talked about. So you need to sit down as a team, even at that table, and go, this is really important that they're hitting us with, or it's not. If it ever comes down to a you didn't say it and you said it, don't play that game. Don't play that game. And even say, this is the second time they've mentioned this. We did, this is our point. This is a more important thing. And once again, if they come back at a fourth time at you with it, somehow, then you go, wow, this seems to be really important to them, but it's not what we're talking about. And it's not our main points of our case. We're going to just say we've answered that, and here's the more important things that we should be talking about. So you've got to try and sound like a more sophisticated and intelligent team. All right? Sound good? Okay.
Who are we facing first?
Don't know. We'll have to look at the
Taking
draw.
someone.
Who are the teams?
Yeah.
Do we know the teacher?
So-
Or
Yeah, not important because we're still trying to learn. Any other questions about this before we finish up, and then I'll give you a topic for next week? No? Good job. So remember, this topic works with things like a musical instrument or, what was the other one that I talked about? Sports. Things like that. So anytime something additional is added in, you've got to talk about what the benefits are.